Hello, everyone. We're back, and I'm here with my dear friend Joy Howard in Paris, and we're going to talk today about her new brand that's essentially just launched a product. Part of the brand is called Early Majority. I'm sure most of you guys, I hope, will remember that we have done a collab in the podcast in the past, and I figured it was nigh on time to return the favor and invite Joy into my living room. Be like, hey, so hey, Joy.
Hi.
Hey, good to see you again. I wish I was over in Paris doing this rather than being in our respective homes, but hey.
Yeah, me too. Because I have those two nice microphones. Remember, we could record ourselves with that.
You see,
Remember those microphones?
I bought one of those, like after our little podcast, I bought like one of those little microphones, right? It just didn't work.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in my dining room, which is where I've been for the last 2 years. So the sound quality is going to be a little echoey. But...
Yeah, same here, same here. I was going to actually open up the window. It's really annoying because we had like really nice weather here for the last 2 weeks. I was going to open up the window and get like a nice breeze going in here, and it fucking started snowing yesterday. Right out of nowhere. So we got like,
I cannot believe that it's snowing right now. But actually, I have to say, like when we talk a little bit more about what I'm actually making, this weather is such a wonderful moment for me.
All right. That's kind of what I was thinking this morning when I was like, oh, it sucks that it's snowing, but now that we're talking about the product that's coming out, I was like, that could be kind of appropriate. Anyway, I'll stop talking, and what I would like you to do is say, hey, this is what I am. This is the brand that I'm doing. So I'm more than curious myself. So please start.
Okay, I will do that. First, I'm sorry for being distracted. I didn't have all my do not disturb things on, but now it's like I'm in focus mode.
And I'm also going to be drinking while we're not drinking, but water close to.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be drinking coffee and water. So.
Okay, I hope nobody take that. If anybody does take offense from that, sorry, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you can hear from my accent, I'm American. So we're always doing really gauche things like eating in public and, drinking coffee in public and stuff like that. So everyone can just get over it.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so basically Early Majority is a technical streetwear brand that makes outdoor gear for all eventualities. We're more of an outdoor brand than we are a streetwear brand, but we want to make stuff that looks good, whether you're in the city or in the backcountry. So it's kind of like the intersection of those two categories. We stand for gender equality in two categories, which you well know have traditionally overlooked the woman's point of view: outdoor space, streetwear space. Women have been an afterthought in both at best. And we're going to market with the membership model, which is how we reduce our environmental impact and also build community. So the idea is that we're going to work together with people who are members of the brand to build a new kind of company that actually makes less and still grows, rather than making more and more and more and more stuff, which basically comes at the cost of the planet, as you well know.
Yeah, totally. That's always, it's such a difficult thing I found, even with doing stuff like for Black Lodges and all the other brands that we work together on and individually, is how to find that balance between, all right, so where we do want to make stuff because people do need to wear clothes. Making clothing is fun, but where do you strike that balance between, all right, where is the how do you deal with the environmental impact, not just from a purely environmental impact. Sorry, drinking last night. But also from in a social level. Making clothing has traditionally been not the coolest thing to do in the world. It just really hasn't. So do, if you can and would like to, explain a little about that. What's your vision of sustainability when it comes to EM?
Okay, well, first I'll say I think you've done a good job, because you've always made like very small batches of things that are very special. And what happens oftentimes, and that's kind of a cool model, right? Where you're just making these very small things that are highly sought after, which we would love to do too. I mean, we still have to prove that people want what we make, but like the idea of making really small batches that people want a lot is really cool. But one of the things that happens with that is that there's a resale market that has grown up around that business model. And that resale market is basically companies like StockX or GOAT. Right. And so part of what we want to do by having members only in our community is basically keep that value for ourselves and for our company together. Sure. Yeah. So that's one part of it. But the bigger part of it is actually just realizing that you can design clothing in a way that's modular and multifunctional. And if you design clothing in a way that's modular and multifunctional, then people actually don't have to buy stuff all the time. You only need like a few pieces to be able to get after it and do whatever it is that you want to do. So the reason that, clothes, especially outdoor clothes, are like splintered into these kind of like highly specialized costumes almost, it's like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not snowboarding, I'm backcountry telemarketing, no, I'm not skiing, I'm, whatever, is there are obviously like slightly different needs, but I think a really intelligent designer could find a way to design something for snow, for outdoor activity, aerobic activity in snow, that would kind of hit a lot of different use cases. And so that's basically how we're designing the clothing. And that is our most vital contribution to sustainability, is basically like, we're going to grow in a way that doesn't require us to try to convince people, that they need a different shoe for this and a different shoe for that and a different jacket for this and a different jacket for that. Rather, we're going to build things that are really multifunctional and modular to try to allow people to just have fewer things, but do more activities.
Which is such an interesting aspect to this business side of things, right? I mean, because traditionally speaking, that's exactly what you shouldn't be doing. Like especially when you work in clothing, that's what we've learned. You make something and then you make more and more and more. You have the rise, or you had the rise of the vertical companies like H&M and Zara over the last 20 years, who just they won't bring out a or 3 or 4 collections here, but like 50 or 60, and just so you keep buying. Which in the capitalistic model makes a hell of a sense, but I find it very fascinating and positively fascinating that we've chosen to say, no, we're not doing that. Like, we're purposely making less. Was that difficult to get people on board with that?
Well, if I didn't have an idea about how we would actually make that successful, it would be really difficult. But I mean, I guess the first thing I just want to say is, like, that model so well, that apparel model so well, the drop model, the whole thing. It's just gotten so insanely out of control and broken. So, half of everything that's made every year ends up in the landfill within a year.
Absolutely.
And the environmental impact of apparel is more than all of maritime shipping and all international flights combined. It's so destructive, and yet somehow it escapes scrutiny in some ways.
Totally nobody wants to talk about it at all. I mean, there are people that are talking about it, of course, but just not enough, or not even close. Yeah, it's a thing, and it's again and I think you mentioning that drop model being so overused. Yeah, for sure. It's one of the reasons why I'm taking a break too, just because hey, everyone's doing it, and before you know it, you'll have brands who'll do a drop model, but still produce 500 shirts, but only will publicly sell 20. The rest of the 480 will end up in a landfill again, just so that margins can be met and numbers can be met. And it's like,
that's 100% correct, and that's like hidden from view. Nobody knows. We have this, we have those statistics that I just cited, but like for every company, they don't disclose how much they actually destroy. And they also don't disclose the other aspect of e-commerce, which is so destructive, and that is just return rates. So like what people are learning now, and I only, I went out to raise money for the idea. And I had no idea about return rates being so high now, except that I put together, like a little financial model for investors. And one of them said like, oh, your assumption about return rates is ridiculous, because we put the return rate in there that we had at Patagonia, right? So, I knew like what % of product was returned. And, she said, no, return rates are like 3 times that. And I was like, across the industry.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit, I had no idea. And the more research I've done on that, it really is absolutely a side effect of, well, just kind of like the growth in DTC, which, has been largely facilitated by Facebook.
Yeah.
And also just this sort of like, nobody really thinking about where it goes, right? So people will buy, sometimes people actually buy 2 of something, knowing that they won't get the size right. And so then they just return the one. And what a lot of people don't know is like half the time that product that you return, it never even gets resold.
Exactly. That's such a head fuck. You'll have, I'm not going to name any names now, but there are so many big online retailers who function predominantly on that model. It's not about selling to make profit. It's about just turnover numbers and turnover numbers and turnover numbers. When sure, on Q1 you'll sell 5,000 shirts, you actually only will have sold 1,000, and 4,000 come back, and then the rest get destroyed. And you're just like, that's just hard. I mean, it's not sustainable at all. Which again is so, to bring it back to early majority, I find it so fascinating positively fascinating. I'm very happy that you've not chosen to go down that route. And from, I've spent the last couple of days just looking at the product, because I think it's one of the first times I've seen the entire product being shot and said, hey, it's really nice. Like, congratulations first. Like, it's really,
Oh my gosh.
I'm excited about it. Where are we going to go with this? Like,
well, first of all, thank you so much, because the product has been such an intensive labor of love. I mean, we're making items that we've dreamed about, like I've always dreamed of having a technical shell that didn't make me look like a dork, that it's just like, it's so simple. It's like, why can't I get a technical shell, that looks good, that I can bike in, whatever. And it's been really, really hard to make it because of all the supply chain disruption. And it's, my first time, like even, anyway, it's been very, very hard. So I really treasure your congratulations, and I'm really glad that you like it. And where it's going is like, I just basically what you see. So the first thing that we want to do is, and what you may have noticed on the website is that there's different pricing for members and for non-members. So the only way this model works, actually, of what I'm telling you that we want to do to transform the apparel industry, is if we can get people to buy in.
Yeah.
And, we had a lot of debates about what the membership price should be. It's very hard to decide what it should be, because that model that you just talked about, all the waste, that goes into the price of the garment, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And the other thing that goes into the price of the garment is all of the marketing that's done on Facebook and all that stuff up front, right? So like, usually the first time you purchase something from a brand, you just, the brand is losing money on you, right? Because they've already invested in advertising and they've wasted stuff. And so they're hoping that you buy again and again and again. Well, obviously we're hoping that people will buy all of their outerwear from us. And that is part of how the membership makes sense for people financially who join, but also people are investing in what we hope will be an alternative model of apparel. So what we're going to do is keep the line really tight and really just try to grow the community such that whenever we're making a new product, we're only selling to community members. And so in the beginning, you'll see there's a member price and a non-member price. And that's just because we don't have a big enough community yet. But the idea would be that, when products go on sale to the community for the first, 10 days, 2 weeks, that we sell out of everything then. And then what's left over would go to non-members, but hopefully someday we'll get to a place where there's never any left over. And so we're only selling to
members. Which would
members.
be the ideal situation. But I think that's the story that is going to be extremely necessary to be told over and over again. Not necessarily how your model will work, because it makes total sense to me. It's logical. But how the rest of the retail industry has worked and still works today. Why are things as cheap as they are? Because and why brands lose so much money for the first couple of years. It's all based on potentially make people buy more and more and more and more gear, which is again completely not sustainable in terms of their ecosystems, and even financially and socially, it's not sustainable. And I think that part of the story, I mean, obviously we're talking about it now, but that's going to be part of what you are going to have to do. I think just keep.
Yeah, it's not absolutely, like, I think the story about how we kind of like flip the ecologically destructive apparel industry on its head.
Yeah.
Like, hopefully that's interesting enough for people that they're like, well, tell me more. How the hell are you going to do that?
Yeah, sure.
But
yeah, it will be, because it's people, it's irrespective of the feeling that we do not see the narrative expanding on sustainability when it comes to it. It is happening, and people are starting to talk about it. But what's been hidden from our industry for so long is that disruptive process and how brands are financed. And it really is. And I know we've had this conversation with all the other brands that we've worked for in the past, but it's so nice to see that it's finally being put out there. It's like, okay, like, if you do want a good product that's well designed, well made, and you don't need to buy one every other year, this is the price it's going to be. I think this is probably like 10 years ago. There's two guys out in San Francisco who wanted to start a denim brand. And we were talking, and we had sat down for coffee, and we were talking about how, what would a pair of jeans cost? Say, for example, not if it's even remotely ecologically sustainable, but what if every person involved in the production supply chain, from growing the cotton to the retail person in the store, would be like a unionized laborer, right? And without even having a profit margin for the people who own the brand, I think we arrived at a price of about $350 at the time for a pair of jeans. That's that's the reality. Like even with t-shirts, you're looking at what, $70 really for, if you want a truly sustainable, not just ecologically, but socially and labor issues is another product. And I think with early majority, I think it's so wonderful that we're finally starting not just that discussion, but making that a reality. It's like, yes, we do want to make clothes. There's nothing wrong with making clothes, but it's got to be done this way. Or I guess I'm reading that right.
Yeah, you are.
Okay,
And
cool.
that's also part of why it's been so hard to make the garments too, because it's like, once you start to think, okay, well, we want to make technical product that really performs outdoors.
Yeah.
And, we want to source it in this way. Unfortunately, most outdoor companies are actually pretty progressive about the materials that they source.
Totally.
So there was a lot of what we could already kind of like, make work within the existing supply chain. The factory that we manufacture in is in Portugal. It's solar powered. It's like, widely renowned as like one of the best places to work. It is actually such a vibe when you walk in there, because you can just feel, the energy and the pride, because Portugal, you have to remember the manufacturing industry in Portugal almost went completely under when everything was outsourced to Asia.
Yeah.
And, the only way they survived, especially this factory, was by deciding that they were going to do things that were very technical, very specialized. And so, that's how they've managed to thrive over time. It's like this, very precision, engineering kind of thing, which has been their game. But the other thing that you bring up, and on the subject of Portugal, is just the degree to which the whole supply chain is going to transform.
Yeah.
And not just in the sense of like, okay, we're not just going to go to the lowest labor cost, but also you actually can't import stuff. Even if you wanted to go, race to the bottom in terms of labor cost, you actually can't even get that stuff into Europe. You can't get it into the US because the global supply, the shipping industry, for example, is so disrupted. And, COVID has been so disruptive. So there's this whole move to kind of, reshore and onshore, from which used to be this kind of like xenophobic, jingoistic kind of thing, right? Like made in America. Yeah. And now it's different because people are like, well, hang on a minute, like that way doesn't even work anymore. So it doesn't matter.
That shit just didn't work.
Yeah, it's better. It just doesn't even work. So like, let's just do what makes more sense and like make all the fabric in Europe and manufacture it in Portugal.
Absolutely. I think it's a really good and solid way forward. I mean, that means something.
I mean, Steven, the transformation that's happening in global manufacturing and capitalism is so much more radical than people realize, because of the just like, we used to talk about the splinter web, right? So like China has its own internet and the US has its own internet. And now, the thing that really bound us all together, this whole supply chain thing, that's also fragmenting too. It's like, first there was COVID, then there was the canal in Panama. And now all the containers that, now there's the boycotts of Russia. And so all of the container ships that were supposed to go to Russia have to turn around, and the whole thing is just like scrambled again.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's, and it's not, I think it's important to take all of these things in perspective and go, okay, it's, it's important to talk about in this by all means. It's going to be interesting. And obviously, and I think I've talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but, about the unipolarity and multipolarity and what's going on in this and the other. I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I remember when Clinton kicked off the whole globalization thing, like I think it was like 91, 92, around that time. And everybody got super excited about it. Fast forward 40 years, we're here, and you're going, well, shit, that didn't really work, did it? It's not that good. So I think the multipolar approach, even in terms of our supply chains and how we work, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing at all. I think there's going to be a lot of potential for different ways of thinking in regards to business and how we make stuff and how we sell stuff, and then what models work, which are more fairer, and, always striving to be as fair as humanly possible. And that's going to be interesting.
I agree. I mean, we have to be, we have to, in many ways, I mean, it would be great if there was a sort of like global union of everybody working together to do the best thing, that vision of globalization, like that would be rad. But what, what was called globalization actually, is what you and I were just talking about, which is like disintermediation of the supply chain, and like, this race to the bottom on labor price, and, the disappearance of manufacturing jobs, and just like all these things that have had such terrible shockwaves for society and for culture.
I mean, in a way, that word in globalization was one of the greatest PR tricks of the last 50 years. because it
Yes, it
sounded
was.
really positive. And ironically, that concept does come from a different political ideology that we spoke about last time we spoke. But yeah, globalization was just a huge con. Essentially, it was just, like I said, driving everything to the bottom, and each to their own, and get as much money out of things as possible, humanly possible.
Well, that's what it became, but there was also, there's another side of it, which is kind of like, post World War II, drive to like, let's never be so separated from each other again that we can otherize each other. So I think, I think part of how you and I met was because of my connection to Germany and having been an exchange student there.
Totally.
And that was a program that was started like after World War II, where the US and Germany were like, hey, like we may not be best friends, okay, but like we can't ever get that far apart again. So let's send our kids to hang out with each other so that we'll understand each other better. It was called Youth for Understanding.
And those programs, it's a shame because I don't think those programs exist anymore, but they did back in the day. So I remember my first teachers in high school, they basically left the US in the mid 60s because they joined the Peace Corps. They lived all over the world doing work that was valuable and important, and their children then grew up in, I think, Africa and Indonesia respectively, and then came to Poland already. That's where we met, and it was like, okay. And that kind of stuff works really well as well. So I think, yes, like multipolarity by all means, but that to keep the globalization concept in terms of humanity, that would be nice, like a little closer thing, especially in regards to the other, like that just needs to stop. That's one of the worst things that's what happens. And again, now the Marxist comes out and goes, well, material conditions under capitalism will provide the othering, but different topic for a different day, I think.
Well, but we're always, the thing is, like, this is why I love being in dialogue with you, is because I think communists have a lot of really good ideas about how to improve capitalism. And, it needs to be improved, because left on its own, it is going to devolve into that version of globalization that we just talked about that's so undesirable. And if you have people who are advocating for a different way, then you have to find a way to do business that isn't so destructive. Absolutely. That is truer to ultimately for all of us, when we're looking at, trends like globalization or Web3 or all these things, like we have to think about, I think the only North Star that we can all really have is like, what is best for the planet and what builds stronger community with each other. Because one of the things that you said to me when I interviewed you, which had such a profound impact on me, we were talking about utopia. And I was like, yay, what's your vision of utopia? And your response, for those of us, who haven't heard that interview, which everyone should, you said to me, utopia is right here. It's just helping each other. It's mutual aid.
Yeah.
And, it really made a profound impact on me. And I think it's true.
I think so too. I still hold on to that. That's when it keeps this thing ticking, basically. Almost out of time. I'm trying to keep this short. I think that people always like, an hour-long podcast, totally gonna listen to that. I'll listen to like the first 5 minutes, say, fuck that. We're gonna keep this short. I will, at the end of this video, and this is for all the viewers and listeners out there, I do all the links and stuff in the newsletter, so you guys can click on this, but by all means do check out Early Majority. Enjoy. Thank you so much for your time. Again, as per usual. It's been delightful.
Thanks for having me. It's always good to see you. Thanks, Steven.
All right. I'll speak to you soon.